Hi, I'm Sarah Craddock with the Southern Historian. I'm here today with 3 of our history PhD students. They're all in their dissertating phases right now, and they're here to talk to us about their experiences in graduate school, but especially talk to us about their hopes and dreams for careers and what other options there may be for the academic market or outside of the academic market. So, I'm going to turn to you guys here. First we have Margaret Montgomery, we have Melissa Young, and we have Chris Roberts. So thank you for joining us today. And just starting out, I wanted to ask you guys, looking back early in your academic career, what were your hopes and dreams for your careers as you came into the program here at the University of Alabama? And maybe give us an idea of how you started out and maybe how the first couple of years affected how you saw your future.
Well, I think my experience, much like a lot of history majors who end up in grad school, was like, I had this great professor and I just really like history and I'm interested in it and I think I can have important things to say, and I was in a similar position in undergrad, and so but I was encouraged by a professor there to take some time and really think about whether or not I wanted to do this. And I came here, and really my first 2 years, the topic of what kind of careers you can have was just not preached. It was spent my time in classes and doing the things like improving writing and the way you read books, but within those first 2 years with the master's program, I never had a conversation with any of the faculty members about like, so what's the likelihood, like what should I aim for here? I still am hoping to teach at an undergraduate level, but my expectations are that I would be just as happy teaching on a community college level as I would four-year universities. So I think figuring out my priority, which in my mind is teaching, really helped out, but that didn't come until much later than me being here. So that's.
How many years do you think it took you to figure that out?
I think it was confirmed the summer after I completed my master's, when I taught during the summer. I think teaching and having the opportunity as a graduate student to teach my own class and do lectures, I think that was when I was like, this is really great. This is what I want to do. And really that's a big opportunity that this program gives their students in the summer.
My experience was completely different. So I had been teaching in a public high school for 9 years when I came here. And I spent some of that time getting my master's degree in history at a different institution where I was warned about the limitations that were associated with a tenure track position. So I came into it understanding that I would not be pursuing teaching, and I didn't want to. I had taught at a community college 6 years already, and just knew that that was not what I wanted to do, that I wanted to do public history. So my focus immediately was on what can I do besides seeking that tenure track type of thing. Right. I already came in with the idea that I would go an alternate route.
Yeah, and you have, further down the road, I think you've done some projects and things like in public history and stuff.
Yeah,
like
so the second year I was here, I think, maybe it was the first year, I had the opportunity to do an exhibition at Gorgas. And that, I had never worked on anything like that before. And at that time, Amy Chen was over there. She's no longer there.
So what was this project then?
It was a project with the library associated with Williams, the Williams collection, and I did it with Lindsay Smith, who was further along than I was, and we partnered up and we did a project on Confederate nationalism. And it was full-blown because Amy had experience with museum curating, and it was a full-blown
exhibit then?
exhibit.
Okay, so you created an entire
An
exhibit.
entire, from
Wow.
the ground up, and we kind of got the experience of what it would be like to not just work with materials, but to develop a narrative, to develop the text that would go along with each item. We chose items, we had all these meetings
Right.
with, you know, kind of higher ups, and it was great, it was a great experience, and I knew after I did that, I was like, this is what I wanna do.
Right, and that's interesting too though, because it's a completely different audience than what you would be trained for in an academic setting, in a classroom.
Normally. Yeah, and I think that they have continued that.
Yeah.
Like, that
Public
there are
history
public
courses.
history
Yeah.
type of opportunities for students. And
Yeah.
I was able to do that in lieu of a class. I think I was required at that time on my, whatever I was on, a fellowship or whatever I was, I can't remember, I wasn't teaching at that time. That I had to take 3 classes, and that counted as one of my classes, and took up as much time as the class would.
And you now are actually kind of going in that direction, right?
Yeah, so I've interned,
So you're doing towards
and-
public history as your
yeah,
career
so
objective.
when I interned for a Holocaust Center 1 year during the summer, and was able to obtain a position as their contract archivist, part-time as I'm going to school. So I work for the Birmingham Holocaust Education Center, and that's what I'm kind of gathering experience as an archivist as I'm doing this as well.
Right. That's interesting though, because I'm seeing your trajectory and your trajectory. It's like you kind of went in with bright eyes and all hopeful, and then you went in like, okay, I've been teaching already for a while, I know what this is about, but so you've already been warned.
I'm married to an academic as well.
Oh, so you are
And
already.
so he's been in it for like 15, 20 years. And
So you had good information
yeah,
on your
already.
side.
I was pre-informed. Yeah.
Right, but I mean, it changes how you go through the whole
Yeah.
process, and getting this experience early on, it's kind of prepping yourself for the future career.
Yeah,
Because it will matter on your resume.
and I think it's like what Margaret was saying, you have to determine what's best for you.
Yeah,
And what you want to do.
yeah,
And I just had already done teaching, and that was just not, I knew it wasn't something I wanted to do.
right,
Yeah.
that's interesting. Well, what about you, Chris?
Well, my kind of track or journey here was a little bit different. I actually started out with a religion background, and so I studied religion in undergrad and did a master's of theology before I even started
Okay.
looking at history.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, fun fact. But so I kind of got the warning when I was there.
Yeah.
And as I was finishing up my program, I wanted to go and do a PhD and to teach. And I was fortunate enough to have an advisor who said, you might want to think about diversifying your resume a little bit. And I had been studying religious history, and so history seemed like a good fit for me. And so that kind of process actually happened a lot earlier, before I even entered into the history field. Now, once I got here, I was in my very first class here. It was a Monday evening, about 6 o'clock at night, and our professor walked in the room, and before we opened a book or looked at any sort of material, he said, basically surveyed the room and said, most of you are not going to get jobs. Some of you aren't even going to finish this program. And so it was a very kind of stern, strong arm to begin with, and that kind of, I think, made me realize that yeah, this is a very competitive field, and I was happy that I had been able to diversify myself a little bit, but
Yeah.
I understood that advice that I'd been given once I entered into the field, and so that was kind of my baptism into the world of history. Was good luck.
Good luck, yeah.
So, but as it turned out, that's been one of the professors I've worked very closely with, and I appreciated his honesty with that. And that's kind of been my approach this whole time, is just to diversify myself as much as possible, because I know it's a competitive field, which, to be honest, that kind of motivates and excites me.
Right.
I like the fact that everyone's not gonna end up there.
That terrifies me.
I'm anxious all the time, even though I've gone a different direction. That's great that you're competitive.
That's a great point though, as far as like appreciating the candid warning
Mhm.
of your professor. For those of you who are going to go into teaching in the future, how do you think you're going to approach, like, let's say you get this tenure track position in a university, how do you envision, based on your own experiences with your different professors and stuff, how do you approach that with your students? Or even if you don't do a tenure track, even if you end up at a community college, one of your students wants to
Right.
go to a four-year university, wants to go for a master's degree or whatever. I mean, how do you approach, I guess, breaking the news to them? You know, how do you do that? Because, I mean, this is an important thing. I think I think our department, but I think in general, the humanities are trying to kind of like, open the playing field. You know,
Right.
you don't have to go for one career. You should be thinking broadly about what you can do with the skills that you learn. So, but, when you're young and, idealistic and you know what you want to go for, sometimes it's difficult to kind of break that news to them.
Well, I think the responsibility first and foremost is with the undergraduate professors. Students have to get recommendations from their professors, and that's the level where there needs to be an honest conversation with teaching is one of many ways that you can go about with this degree, but you need to be open to that not working out. I think the responsibility first and foremost are with those professors who are writing the recommendations. And I think part of that, part of the reason that those conversations might not be happening is the generational difference between academia, right? Like a lot of the professors who are writing these recommendations have been tenured for years and years and years, and their experience with the job market and their experience with what's going on is different than, say, a recently joined faculty member. And I think that's part of what's happening. But I think that, I'm just saying this over and over again, the responsibility begins with those professors who are writing the recommendations.
Well, this is interesting. I've been thinking about this somewhat just because, also thinking about faculty and where they come from. A lot of them are from very prestigious universities, and they've kind of had this, I guess, a different experience in academia than if you were going to teach at a community college and they're moving up to a four-year university. There's also those fears, and there's also the realities of what your options are. Have you guys given any thought to, I guess, how would say, the ranking or the prestige aspect of academic market options? Because I know for me, just to speak personally, that was always one of the things is okay, I'm going to, it's a good school, but it's not like the top tiers, right?
Right.
So how do I be realistic with myself? What are the real things you should say to yourself, and what are the real options? Should I think it's really limiting, or is it really based on the work that I produce, and that's how far I get?
That was actually
that's-
what I was gonna say. I think it is based on the work that you produced.
Yeah.
I think that you end up producing. I don't know if I would think, which again, I'm on an alternate track, sort of with that in mind, but still I don't see the fact that I'm here as limiting, I guess. I just don't look at it that way. I don't know if you guys do. I see my own limitations more than that. I see the sort of, the fact that I seem to not have enough time every day to complete what I would like to do with my own work. But that's kind of how I look at it. I don't know.
I think I'm just going to keep with this theme with the responsibility of having these conversations. I think the second round of responsibility with programs like Alabama and programs that might not be Brown or Princeton is during that transition between master's and PhD students say, these are the schools that when students here have gotten jobs, these are the kinds of positions that they've been able to acquire. So, but for me personally, within the past couple of years, thinking about where graduates have ended up, that's really formed, influenced the way I see my trajectory.
Yeah.
And I think having that be a conversation, an intent, like a conversation that happens between the professor and the student, not necessarily something that the student eventually was oh, I'm gonna figure this is happening and I'm noticing for myself.
Right.
So I think, and I do think programs like Alabama have a niche market.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not going to R1. I mean, but a lot of the students are going, or graduates are getting teaching jobs or at places where teaching is emphasized. And for me, like I mentioned earlier, that's the vein that I want to go in. So it's been,
So you're in a good position.
I'm in a good position, I think. I'm in a good program for that.
You build upon that,
Yeah.
though. So like where you start doesn't necessarily mean that's not necessarily going to be where you end.
True.
So, right, the fact that people are getting jobs is super encouraging to me. It's like, oh, somebody else got a job, yay. You know, because like Chris said, we're told at the beginning, might not get a job, probably won't get a job.
But even on that note, like, even if you don't get a job in academia, I find that like across the board, everybody gets some sort of job. There's so many skills you can learn and then transfer that to some other type of, discipline or market,
Yeah,
so.
and I think it's important to build your resume as you go along.
Yeah.
You know, like Chris was saying, diversify, make sure you have several skills to offer.
Can you elaborate on diversify?
Yeah, I mean, so, in the academic sense, I mean, having multiple fields that you can play around with. So, one of the, back to the conversation I had, after graduating from my master's program, I was told basically, you have all the knowledge that you're gonna get. You could get really specific on this subject. But, a PhD in religion versus a master's degree in religion at this point is not gonna be that advantageous. And as it turns out, I have been at community college level teaching world religions ever since I graduated from a master's program. So to some extent, at least, that was correct. So with a history, a PhD in history, that will allow me potentially to teach history, teach religious history, world religions. And there's a lot of different things. And if you can come in with a resume with multiple things that you're capable of doing, I think that you are more competitive in the job market. So, so that's why we diversify oneself.
And I can kind of add to that, because even though, earlier I talked about being bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, between undergrad and here, I got a master's in Southern Studies from Ole Miss, which is an interdisciplinary program, right? And there was a considerable amount of time between that and here, and I think one of the things that I valued from that program was the ability to diversify, to borrow your word. I worked with an organization called the William Winter Institute for Racial Reconciliation, which was more of an activist group that was affiliated with the university. And so one of the things that at that time was a hang-up for me going into academia was what I saw as the lack of engagement with the community around. And so being able to work with that group at Ole Miss, I think looking and being able to say, I've done this kind of work before, I can do this again, has been, I'm hoping will be advantageous for me.
Yeah. You definitely need to focus on the kinds of things that you're doing already. Like, we learn to write really well. We learn to research really well. We learn to teach. We learn to convince freshmen at 8 o'clock in the morning that don't want to be sitting in our classrooms to have a conversation, but that we convince them to do that. So, if we can do that, we can do anything. And so you have to be able to market yourself. Plus, as Chris said, if we diversify and gain experiences, for me, it's archiving or exhibiting or curating or even working somewhere in publications or something like that. You can offer a lot, and then that makes you a lot more competitive.
So as a final note, what is like a single piece of advice that you would give to somebody entering into graduate school when they're thinking about careers?
Mm-hmm.
What would you say? Maybe something you didn't know that you wish you'd known, or how to look at their future, what they need to start doing, or something like that.
I would say, I think we've kind of all echoed this, but to some extent, have a backup plan. Have multiple things that you can do. So if you're going for a tenure track and that's just, it's so competitive, it doesn't work out, have something to fall back on. And this may be the competitiveness within me at the same time. I I think that going after, if you want to be a tenure track professor, then go after it. And, it's competitive and you're going to have to beat out, 90% of the people that you're studying with, but that's okay. So roll tide.
There you go. I had an intern just recently who decided to pursue her PhD, and so we had this conversation. And what I pretty much told her, what my advice was go into it with your eyes open. Understand what you're getting into. Be realistic, which is kind of, again, we're kind of all echoing that. So that would be my advice.
I guess don't figure out, you need to find out what interests you, like in terms of, like, if you're interested in teaching, be at peace with teaching on multiple levels and multiple situations. Figure out what kind of skills or what kind of things you hope to do that's driving you towards this degree, right? So if it's presenting the information to the public and public history, then look at it that way, but just try and figure out what generally is drawing you to this program and figure out ways that, or be open to ways that you will use what is attractive about the PhD program just in ways that aren't tenure track.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Margaret, Melissa, Chris, thanks for joining us. All right.
Thanks.